Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Hi, Jane.
What have you got for us today?
Oh, actually, I saw something really interesting in the Nikkei about Japan and e-money.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're very fancy with your e-money, but Japan as a country really isn't that hot on the e-money side of things. They're getting used to it now, but I saw this Nikkei article about Japan going completely cashless for the Osaka Expo that's coming up in 2025. I thought that's quite interesting. They're going to expect 28 million people to visit the expo, and nothing is going to be cash. It's going to be absolutely all cashless. And supposedly this is the first time it's been done for the expo around the world, and it will be the very first time it's going to be completely without any cash.
Oh,
so I
wow.
thought that was a very interesting article.
Interesting that probably the people who will struggle the most will not be the people coming from overseas, but the people in Japan, right?
That's saying it. Saying it. Yeah, I'm still getting used to people not using it. Sometimes in the taxi you can use cashless, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it takes longer for your card to be processed than it does handing over a 1,000 yen to pay for a taxi ride. How about your experience? You seem to be quite up with it with all your cashless stuff that you're doing. Have you got any stories to tell?
I've got all the cashless things happening. Well, recently went to Tokyo Dome to watch a professional baseball game, and it's a completely cashless place, right? So it says everywhere it's cashless. They advertise it that Tokyo Dome is cashless. So if you want to get a beer or buy any food, you have to have some kind of card or app to pay for things. So the girls who go around selling the beer, right, they show up with their little card reader things, and you just tap your card, or they scan your phone, an app on your phone. You can buy beer from them. The chap in front of me bought 7 beers with his phone. I was watching him.
Good on them. Helping the economy. Oh my God.
Anyway, the city where I live has really been pushing these different kinds of e-money or different apps that you can use for cashless payments. And it was such a juicy offer that we really had to get on it and sign up for all of them. So there were 3 apps you could join. And if you spent 10,000 yen within 1 month, at a certain supermarket chain in our city, you got 30% cash back. 30%.
That is great.
3,000 yen back for spending 10,000 yen using one of 3, and you could use all 3. So my husband and I both used all 3 apps, got 3,000 from each one. We made quite a lot of money. It was quite a lucrative month for us. Yeah.
What an incentive.
Yeah, great incentive. And it's just to get people using these things, because there's a little bit of a sort of hurdle. You have to get yourself registered and put your ID in there, and they want some kind of photo ID to confirm who you are, connect up your bank account, etc. Once you get going, it's very, very easy. So to get people to get over that hurdle, they offered that very, very juicy offer, which we happily took advantage of. And Brilliant. Now I have all of these different ways to pay for things that I probably won't use, because I do have my favorite one that we tend to use more than anything. But yeah, when you go into a shop, it's like you look at all the little logos next to thing, what do you have? Which one shall I use? But yeah, definitely there are a couple that are more convenient than others to use. And definitely every store has PayPay, for example. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's probably the one I should go and sign up with. And people listening will be going, why have you not already signed up? Well, I have tried a few times, but my last name is a real tricky one, like Okoneru.
Oh, that would really be a pain in the bum.
Tricky because of the dash after ko, right? Okoneru. It's a long sound, and apps don't really like me registering that. And so I end up registering just Okoneru, and it doesn't sound like me. And so I have to prove who I am. And if I send some other information, it doesn't match. So I've actually had a big F for failure on my e-money applications so far, but I might have you help me out with that one next time.
Well, some of them are more tricky than others, but if you cannot, get that thing connected with your bank account, you can always put cash into them using an ATM in 7-Eleven or convenience store if
Um,
you did want to have that option. You can
the
charge them up
convenience.
using it at the
Ah,
convenience store. Yeah,
that is good.
it's for
Well, it
those
looks
people who
like anyone who's
struggle.
going to come through here in 2025 to go to the Osaka Expo, which apparently is going to be amazing because it's showcasing technology. So they have to kind of show up with showing technology, don't they? It's going to be amazing, and everyone has to use this Expo digital wallet
Hmm.
to be able to buy inside and outside. So get yourself ready for that if you're coming through to Osaka.
Mm.
Just remember too that Japan also still does quite like cash, especially in some places. I went to a medical doctor in the last week. Well, I said, could I pay cash? And he went, oh, we only take cash. So that
Oh
was
my
very
God, they had
interesting.
no e-money options,
Nothing,
not even PayPay?
nothing. And even just
Wow.
rung it up on this little sort of little machine that had big numbers raised off the top of, went flat against the
Yeah,
surface of
yeah,
the
yeah.
machine, raised up chong 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 as he wrote. He tapped the numbers out, and a little piece of paper billowed out, and he
Mm.
put his little signature on there and a little hanko, stamp on there, and gave it to me. And
Goodness
well,
me.
that was very interesting. I felt very retro there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just never know when you'll stumble across somewhere that's cash only still. So,
It
yeah,
does
in
happen, especially in the
Japan.
regions, and
Mm.
even, well, Tokyo. That's a little bit out of central
Mm.
Tokyo, but there you
Hmm.
go.
Yeah, so,
Interesting.
yeah. What have we got coming up this week in our episode?
Well, our episode is with Jon Walsh, and we've known Jon for a number of years and really, really excited to have him because he's an urban farmer. He's an urban consultant, or he's an urban farmer who consults on urban farming. He's briefed so many people, 2,000 people apparently, on how to grow healthy food in an urban environment. And we're really happy to have him on the show today. There's so many juicy pieces in here, and we think they'll be really great for anybody who's listening and following the show for tips for doing business in Japan.
Let's hear it from Jon.
Kia ora, Jon. Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show today.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
So, Jon, we like to start with a warm-up question. So our warm-up question for you is, what's your favorite Japanese vegetable that's not well known outside of Japan that you recommend everybody give a try?
Oh, I'd say daikon. Yeah, giant Japanese radish. Yeah. That's sort of comes
Yeah.
in sizes. Yeah. No, I've been sort of growing that myself. There's like a mini daikon that's possible to grow, and then there's the regular ones you buy from the supermarkets, and then there's the huge ones that the farmers grow, which
Lovely.
would be like twice the size of the regular ones. Yep,
Mm.
they're great.
How do you eat your mini daikons? Are they different, are they more for salads, or they should be boiled, or how do
Oh,
you prefer to eat them?
you just sort of basically use them just like you'd use a normal radish, just sort of chop them up and throw them into salad. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
we like to have the boiled stewed one. That's
Oh,
one
you,
of our
yeah,
favorites in the winter time. But we need like the really long, massive ones that the farmers get, and we
yeah.
chop them into big circles and boil
Oh, yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's really
that's good.
delicious. Really
Yeah,
warming, right, in the
yeah.
winter. How about you, Catherine? What's your favorite Japanese vegetable that you recommend everybody tries?
you just got me thinking about daikon, but I do love a warm daikon, and also the daikon salad is just
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I was
Oh,
thinking, to me, renkon, lotus root, it's
that's
my
awesome.
all-time favorite. I love it naturally. I also love it, and it sometimes comes as a tempura, deep fried. I absolutely have fallen in love with renkon.
Yeah.
Lotus root. I love the shape of it. It looks cute. I love when you bite through, you can see all the
Yeah, such a
holes in it.
great
I just love the texture,
consistent, texture.
flavor. It's very good. It's got lots of fiber. It's my go-to vegetable if I had a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane, you?
My favorite Japanese vegetable would have to be gobo, which is burdock root in English. Very long, just looks like something you can't imagine how you would eat it. Quite tricky to prepare, but it really adds a great flavor to the foods that you put it in, like tonjiru, that's pork soup, or takikomi gohan, which is the rice that has been cooked with flavors and bits of meat and vegetables in it. So
I'm hungry.
yeah.
Jane. I'm hungry now.
Yeah, look at us, so healthy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
have you
Very.
it
tried
does.
gabor chips? just like turmeric chips back home, but they're basically sliced and fried, and
Yeah.
you can have even with like sour cream, just like with turmeric chips. Yeah, really good. Yeah.
There you go. So those are our top tips, Japanese vegetables to try if you haven't already tried them, if you're new to Japan. Takes a while to give these things a go. But once you get into them, yeah, they're really, really delicious.
Fantastic. Well, John, so excited to have you. We'll be putting your full bio into the show notes later. But tell us about your background, where you came from in New Zealand, and how you came to be starting the urban farming business in Japan. We understand it had sort of inspiration from the unfortunate, shall we say, aftermath of the Christchurch earthquake and Tohoku earthquake. Please tell us a little bit there about your background.
Basically, I went to Auckland University and did a 3-year science degree, majoring in applied statistics, and then basically got into working for like quite a few large New Zealand companies, including the tax department, the statistics department, Bendon Lingerie, Golden Bay Cement, and I was basically doing IT and data management jobs for them, and it was all basically IT and helping companies to increase their profit margins. And then I went to the UK for 2 years and worked for Filofax UK, doing like production planning at their Filofax factory. You'll probably recall the Filofaxes were hot items in the night in the season license. You had the Filofax diary, yeah. And I moved here in 20 years ago now, 2002, I think it was, and got married next year. And then basically got into professional writing and editing and proofreading for a number of magazines and translation companies. Basically, I'm doing editing for translation companies and writing a whole lot of articles for a whole bunch of like magazines here. And I basically switched from IT to professional writing and editing, and that was fine until 2011, and the earthquake struck in Christchurch. And then a couple of weeks later, there was the massive one up here in Tohoku. And my cousin was in Christchurch at the time of the Christchurch quake, and he was in the tax department office directly across the road from the CTV building, Christchurch TV.
Right.
And right after the first quake, he basically rushed outside of the tax office and crossed, and then the CTV building was just a pile of rubble. It had just collapsed. And he ran up onto this pile of what was left of the CTV building. And he was helping. And my auntie told me about this. And oh my God, that was a shocker. That was a real shocker. And it's sort of like created this connection. I wasn't there. I was here in Japan, but it created a connection that still cuts. Yeah. And then after those 2 quakes, which happened, there was only like 2.5 weeks between them, I think.
Yes.
And they basically just made me think that if a massive quake the size of either of them hit Tokyo, which it could, and it just there was like 2 quakes last night, so we're always aware of earthquakes. I just thought, right, if there was massive damage here and supermarkets got destroyed and the roads where the trucks carrying food to supermarkets got blocked, I just thought, where would food come from if we suddenly got to the point where supermarkets were not functioning, so we couldn't just walk down the road to buy food? And at that time, my wife and my daughter was 3 years old, and I just thought, right, what's the plan if an earthquake, a massive one, hits Tokyo, and we can't buy food, and we've got 15 or so million people living here in Tokyo, and many people, I'm sure, have emergency supplies, which would probably last a week at most.
Yeah.
And the scary thing is what would happen when people's supplies ran out and you suddenly found you had no water and no food and kids who were thirsty and hungry. So I thought, right, what's the deal? What's the answer? And I didn't have one, which scared the pants off me. So I just thought, right, where would food come from? And then I thought, okay, it would be good if I had some at home. So I thought, okay, that sounds like gardening. So I went out to the local 100-yen shop and bought a flower pot and some soil and a packet of spinach seeds, and sowed the seeds. And a few weeks later, I had some spinach leaves. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Wow. This is like magic. And then I just did that again, bought some more pots and some more soil and more seeds. And within a month or 2, I had a tiny little back garden growing herbs and different vegetables. And I was like, man, this is cool. This is really cool. And I sort of realized that having a home garden can act as an emergency food supply in case of an emergency. And it's also fresh food. And if you grow it yourself, it's going to be really cheap. It's immediately accessible, which is the key point.
Yeah.
So that was exciting. And then my wife said, oh, you should probably hire a community garden plot in our town that we live in here in North Tokyo. It's got lots of community gardens. So I did. And I started renting a tiny 15 square meter plot, which is slightly wider than a standard car parking space. And this in 2012, I grew like 1,600 tomatoes and about 400 cucumbers and a stack of lettuces and herbs and all this food, and started giving it to the neighbors because I was growing so much. And then I just thought, man, this is amazing. And I took my daughter to the garden and taught her how to sow seeds, and she picked it up, bang, just like that. And that made me think, oh, I could maybe teach kids. And prior to that point, I hadn't taught anything. I've never taught English, and I have no professional teaching skills or experience prior to that point. And then I contacted a Tokyo International School. I'd written an article about the founder, Patrick Newell, many years ago when I was working for a magazine. And I just contacted him and said, hey, do you grow food at school? And he said, no, but we're interested. Can you come in?
Oh,
So I
wow.
went in. So I just went in and I had this was back in the day when we had photos. So I took a whole lot of photos of the food I had been growing in my community garden patch, covered the table with these photos, and they hired me on the spot to teach. But the problem with that was I had nothing to teach. No experience and no lessons. So I spent the next 3 months cooking up 10 urban farming lessons to teach the students, and that was the start.
What a humble beginnings from just you having this realization that what happened in Christchurch could happen in Tokyo. And I also had very similar thoughts when I saw that happen in Christchurch. I thought that could happen here in Fukushima where I live. And that was definitely an unpopular opinion at the time because everybody thought, no, we have a nuclear power station here, that the government would never have built one here. We could have a big disaster like that happen. Famous last words just 2 weeks before that actually happened. And then you went out and bought one pot, a bag of seeds and some soil and did a mini experiment that worked.
It worked out.
And off you went. Wow. And tell us where you are today with this urban farming. What's happening?
It's been a dream that I never had. Really.
You never knew you wanted to do this. That's fantastic.
I had no experience growing food. My mum and all of my grandparents back home, they were keen gardeners, but none of them taught me anything about growing food.
Right.
I might get onto that a bit later, but yeah. And so, yeah, right now I've been into urban farming now for 12 years, since 2012, and I've basically been I think the only native English-speaking professional urban farming consultant and instructor in the whole country for the last 10 years, until I hired a partner to work with me, who's now number 2.
Okay.
And I've gone from teaching urban farming programs at one international school per growing season, of which there's 2 per year, from 2012 until about 2020, just teaching at one school. Then I was taken on by 2 other schools. And last year I was teaching at 6 schools, which is pretty difficult because there's only 5 working days in a week, and 5 school days in a week. Just last November, I ran a massive multi-grade urban farming project at the British school in Tokyo. They're the first school ever I've come across here that is introducing urban farming into multiple grades. And the project that I ran with my partner, we taught all of the junior school, 800 kids from kindergarten up to grade 6. We were basically going around 3 classes per morning, both of us. So we're teaching 6 classes, about 20 students each, from Monday to Friday, 1 week in the middle of November. In 1 week, we trained 800 students. And then we did the same thing. We just completed another project like that at St. Mary's International School, also in Tokyo, training 400 students from kindergarten to grade 5. And we just launched the outdoor program there on Monday.
Brilliant.
We went from running indoor introductory urban farming programs for 7 weeks from January to February at the school. And then we kicked off an outdoor program on Monday. It's gone absolutely nuts. And it's just such a blast. It really is good because I'm teaching kids how to improve their health and hopefully put them on a healthy trajectory for the rest of their lives. Once they know, hey, that we can actually grow healthy food, hopefully they will start at some point and teach others.
Have you had feedback that they've gone home and done things at home or
Oh
started
yeah,
their own? Yeah.
yeah. There's been quite a few kids who they've been so excited when they go through my programs that they go home and start gardens and then take pictures and send the pictures back to their teachers.
That's brilliant.
That's lovely.
Yeah, that's great stuff. But the thing is, the really weird thing about all this is none of it's rocket science. And I know that many of our mums and dads and grandparents and people in every generation before us, this is exactly what they've done, but they weren't as excited.
Because they just had to do it, probably. And,
They
I
did.
think,
They did. Yeah.
but at the same time, it's the most joyful hobby. And apparently in New Zealand, gardening is the most popular hobby amongst New Zealanders.
I didn't know
Yes.
that.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
And, I grew up, Dad had a garden that was all vegetables, a massive garden. We grew kiwi fruit. I learned, about the male female plant of the kiwi fruit. We had a lovely big section where you used to play cricket as well. And around the garden, it was sort of mum's job with that part of the garden. And so I grew up with gardening and just love it. I don't think we appreciate it as Kiwis when we've got it around us. It's the obvious that we miss.
I think so too.
I love how you said, though, that it's a dream you never knew you had, and it's a skill you never knew you had. It gets me thinking, and I think you're the same, Jane, how we may all have some skills or things that we do that are in our zone of genius as Kiwis here, and we don't even recognize that. We might be great bakers, or we might be people who, like you were doing, writing, or something that we think, oh, I just do that. It's just something I do. But it could be leveraged pretty well for, you to do a business here, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think that the dream is to basically find something that you love and that pays you.
Yep.
Because if you get to the point where you love what you do, then your work is probably not, you probably won't consider what you do as work. It'll just be fun and you'll be being paid for it. I mean, find something better than that, you probably won't.
At the schools, are the teachers also getting involved, or are they standing and watching and dying to get into it, or are they also getting their hands into the soil nice and dirty?
Oh, yeah, it just depends on the teacher. But the surprising thing is that almost all of the teachers who ask me to teach their classes at these international schools, almost all of them are in exactly the same position I am. Either their mum or their dad or their grandparents are farmers or gardeners. So these teachers, just like you were saying, Catherine, they've seen their parents growing food and they inherently know that growing food is good, but they never learned themselves. And in my case, personally, with these teachers, they've come across this Kiwi guy called Jon Walsh, who's providing some urban farming services. And I think it triggers something in their memories of probably playing games and running around their mums and dads' gardens when they were kids. And then they think, oh man, I've seen this. I've seen vegetables like this before. My mum used to grow them back in New Zealand, back in England, whatever. And I think what I do is that it's actually triggering some very deep memories for people who are enthusiastic about what I do. It's great. And in the case with most of the teachers that I work with, they're always telling me about, oh yeah, back in Sydney, my mum's growing this and I'm sending videos of your lessons to my mum and dad back in Australia and such. They've got a connection. It's wonderful. It's really good.
Your work's having ripples internationally.
So, John, you mentioned that you have brought a partner into the business because things are growing, literally. Tell us a little bit more about who this person is. We'd love to
the
hear.
number two.
He's Richard Mayers. He's from New York. Prior to starting to work with me, he was a hedge fund manager for many years. And when his wife and he had 2 baby daughters, Richard sort of basically completely lost motivation for what he was doing in the finance sector. And he started to think about his future and the future of his daughters. And he basically came to realize that the world that they were basically moving into didn't look particularly positive. And so he basically became really motivated to help to create a better world for them, which sounds like a cliche, but it's much more than that. And so Richard, he got in touch with me through a mutual contact, and he basically said, I like what you do. Can I join you? And when I found out about his experience, which was zero, he had no experience teaching anything at all, and he had never grown food before. I thought, okay, I don't know how far this is going to go. But what really caught my eye with Richard was he was really, really enthusiastic about what I was doing. And it sort of really made me think that if I'm going to partner with someone, what kind of person do I want? And I listed 3 things. And number 1 was, do they have teaching skills? Number 2, do they have food growing skills? And number 3, how enthusiastic are they for growing food and teaching? And then I quickly thought about those 3 things and rejigged them and put the enthusiasm at the top as the most important personal characteristic that I'm looking for in a potential partner. Because if they are only enthusiastic for the money, then they will lose motivation for the work. And so I thought, right, the most important thing in a potential partner for me is they got to be enthusiastic about growing food and spreading the good news about how to do that. And he is. And I thought, right, I can teach skills. I can teach teaching skills. I can teach him how to grow food. That's the easy thing. And so I basically asked Richard to come along and help me co-teach at one school. That was back in, I think, March last year. And since March last year, I've got him into 7 international schools now. He's been co-teaching with me for 12 months. And he's awesome. I'm extremely happy with how he's been helping out, and he's now getting business of his own.
Brilliant.
And if at some point he breaks away in the future and does more of what we're doing together, I'll be extremely happy, because my mission is to tell as many people as possible how to grow food themselves without chemicals. And if he continues that mission, bring it on. Go for it.
What's this doing business in Japan, taught you about Japan?
I was thinking about this kind of thing last night, and I thought that being a Kiwi, or actually being a non-Japanese here in Japan, you can't really import your reputation, because in most cases, like, unless you're super famous, like an All Black or some kind of sportsman or famous cook, no one's going to know you here when you move. So it doesn't really matter how famous you are back home. You've got to start from scratch. And here in Japan, like most of us know, customer service is king. The customer is king. And what I've learned is what I call the PPP, the 3 Ps. Okay, so what are the 3 Ps? I say that that 3 Ps are to be basically prompt, be professional, and be polite. And especially be polite in Japan. I know in New Zealand doing business, there's a lot more flexibility. You don't have to be. You can be a bit more sharp around the edges when you're communicating, depending on how good or not a business relationship is. But here, I think it's really important just to be polite at all times and be professional, especially considering how massive the market is here. Because if you create a good reputation for yourself, you can go a long way with multiple millions of people here as a potential market, as opposed to back home where it's tiny.
Yeah, the 3 Ps, that's awesome. You've summed that up really nicely. Promptness, professionalism, and politeness. This goes very, very far. And you're right. You are starting from scratch when you come here. You have to rebuild that. No matter how famous you are anywhere in the world, you may be still completely unknown here in Japan. But also, you have an opportunity to stand out quickly. And I think that's something that Japanese people have said to me, and they're very envious of me, is that you stand out. And it's easy to stand out because you're not just one of a million other people, Japanese people, for example. So be aware of that, how easily you do stand out and make the most of it, but also be polite, professional, and prompt, because it will be noticed when you're not. Yeah.
Is there something, Jon, here about the system in Japan, maybe business system, or the way that you've been able to interact, get your negotiations and contracts with the schools? And I know you've done something with the Grand Hyatt as well. Is there something about that that's a little bit different in Japan that perhaps, say, Kiwis should be aware of, the way of approaching? I know you've talked about your 3 Ps, but what does that lend itself to in the way that you approach people? in the system here, I guess we'll call it a system, ecosystem in Japan of doing business? Any tips there?
I think what made me stand out in the first place was what Jane touched on and like before, simply the fact that we're different. We're not a local. And in terms of like the Grand Hyatt Hotel, just briefly, that was and my company was hired to install a 4 raised bed organic garden for the Grand Hyatt Tokyo in 2019. And they basically wanted a on-site garden so that the chef could tell the guests that, hey, this food on this salad that I've just put in front of you comes from that garden right outside that window there. And the marketing department wanted a garden so that they could basically promote that they had an on-site vegetable garden as opposed to a flower garden. Yep. So in terms of first contact with companies, I just took a risk and put myself out there. And I was dealing with English speakers in the first place, which probably made a big difference. They knew that there would be no communication problems. Yeah, that's a really good question, Catherine. That's a really good question. And I think
you've just given a really good answer, John. So, right? You're putting yourself out there, and perhaps if Japanese is not your best area, then you approach people who are in your native language. They can find their way of communicating with their team in Japanese if they need to. But that's it. Getting yourself out there, I think, is your key point there.
Yeah. And quite possibly what I did with the Grand Hyatt was that no one had ever approached them before about installing a garden on site.
There you go.
So just being like a first mover, if you're the first person who contacts a potential client with a new service and no one else does, then why wouldn't they say yes if you're good?
Yeah, they realize this is the thing that they didn't know they needed, right? Look at the amazing marketing that came from it. Yeah.
It's the dream that they never knew they needed, right? Interesting.
Yeah.
You reminded me of, like, in Christchurch in the Botanic Gardens, there's the curator's house, and they have a little garden outside there. And they profess that the food that is on your salad here and even the edible flowers are all from that garden out there. And it used to be like, wow, how that garden to table was amazing. But you made me think.
Farm to table.
I love that answer. Thank you so much. What other things might be helpful for Kiwis to be doing here to be successful in business? Is there anything that you can recommend? Or actually, perhaps you nurture gardens very, very much so. You nurture your vegetables. How do you also nurture your customers here?
I try to educate as many people as possible simply by continually talking about urban farming and growing food. And I'm quite happy to be accused of plastering the internet with food photos and information about the schools that I teach at. I'm quite happy to be accused of that, Crow. But there's a mission behind it. There's like a purpose behind all that. And that's to basically show that I'm an expert, or I profess to be an expert. And the key to my marketing is to basically show and clearly demonstrate that I can do what I'm trying to market.
Yeah.
And this is a really big deal for me because I'm not a marketing expert, but from what I've found personally, I think that the best way to market yourself is to basically do what you say that you can provide first. Get the photos if possible, and then you can promote yourself. And because you've done what you are trying to promote and sell, people will see, hey, this person's not just talking about I can install a garden.
You should get a garden.
I actually did it.
You're saying
multiple times.
You're saying you've done it, and here's the photos. And I think to me that's an amazing way to market because it shows commitment that you can actually do what you profess to do. It shows enthusiasm and it shows ability. So to me, the best way to market yourself is to basically do what you are trying to market and promote first. So that people can see
walk your talk.
This guy's walking the talk. He's not just saying he can do X, he's done it.
Yeah.
And so it brings me to the famous Nike slogan, just do it. I've found that's inspired a whole lot of people around the world, but I find that quite depressing because that clearly implies that you haven't done it. I think it should be just done it, not just do it.
I've just done it, right? It's a better one, right? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people sitting around thinking of all the great things they could possibly do and they're not actually doing any of them. Yeah. But you're definitely getting out there and telling people or showing people what you can do and that you can help them. Yeah, walking that talk. And that goes a long way in Japan, right? I often hear that Japanese people are watching you, right? They're observing you, and they're watching what you do more or almost as much as what you say, right? Because what you do is very important. So yeah, that's great. And to everybody keep that front of mind. Your actions speak very loudly in Japan, that's for sure.
Yep. One more way, I think, to work with customers is to basically offer tasters of what you do. Now, this, of course, depends on exactly what you're offering. But when you go to large supermarkets, sometimes you'll find people like staff offering like free bits of cake or free kimchi or free stew. To me, is an incredibly powerful marketing technique.
Yeah.
Because you don't just get to look at the product through the packet and check what it looks like and the color and so on. You actually get to taste it. And I think once you get to taste something or use it, you'll be much more likely to buy it if it's good. And so I'm using that idea in my business too. And especially when I go to schools and meet with management of a potential school client, I'll try and take some tomatoes, put them on the boardroom table and say, try these. I grew them. And then say that you and your students can grow food like this right here at your school. It's a taste test of a service.
Well, that's your CV, isn't it? That's your CV in action.
Yeah. I'm kind of lucky because I deal in food that can be consumed. But that idea can be tweaked. Just offer a trial. I'm like a free trial.
Sure.
So people can actually experience your product or service, and rather than just read about it in some flash glossy brochure.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that happens all across Japan. Everything like come and have a free trial of golf lesson. I recently started golf, and I got a 1 hour free with a golf pro to see if I wanted to join up. And after that, I was keen. I was like, "Yep, I'm doing this." If I hadn't had that, I'd be like, kind of. But they invested that 1 hour with me. And now they've got many, many thousands of yen out of me and that's a loyal customer. Yeah, I'd love to see you working with more restaurants and things around Tokyo. Wouldn't it be fantastic to have this kind of thing going on, becoming quite common?
And a lot of them do focus on flowers. I mean, I was at Tokyo American Club just yesterday, John, and they're redoing the garden at the front entrance, where people pull up for their parking. And it's laid out like a Japanese garden, but that's got me thinking, there's a New Zealand chef there, so there might be a section of the land that they might like to devote to vegetables.
A big smile on your face.
So you never know.
I've already checked that. I've contacted
Lindsay, are you listening? Lindsay,
some years ago. Yeah. They've certainly got the potential to have large gardens there.
They've got the sections there, right?
They've got the restaurants, so yeah.
I know you've been really diligent in preparing for this episode today with us. Is there something that you also prepared that we haven't asked you yet that you'd like to us to ask you or give the answer to?
And one more thing that I really want to mention is I'm basically getting into, or not just getting into, I'm focusing on school food donations and getting students at the schools that I teach at to basically donate some of the food that they grow to Second Harvest Japan Food Bank here in Tokyo.
Brilliant.
The bottom line here is I kicked off a CSR strategy back in about 2013 called Grow for Good. And the concept behind Grow for Good can be encapsulated in 4 words: grow some, give some. So the plan is to encourage as many schools and corporates too as possible to install on-site gardens, grow food for the staff and students, and donate the excess to food banks. And I've been doing this with schools since 2013, and as the years go by, usually the school gardens get larger and larger, and so the harvests get bigger, and the donations do too. And in the last 3 years, I've organised some massive donations from a few international schools here, 12, 13, 14, 15 kilograms of student-grown food to Second Harvest Japan Food Bank, which basically gives it away to people that need it in Tokyo same day, straight away.
Wow.
People
they get fresh food.
They get fresh food.
That's brilliant.
It's also
It's
teaching the students, isn't it, to know about the fact that they're, in a really great place, and there are people in Tokyo and other parts of Japan that are not. And so helping others is also very important. So you're teaching another social skill,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah.
acknowledgement that there are others who need help, and this is a way
Yeah.
we can do it.
That's certainly true, Catherine. Yeah, and the big deal about that is that specifically with the international schools, most of the kids come from rich families, and I won't mention names here, but one of the schools that that I've been working at, the head of school said that most of our students mainly focus on the next family ski trip and the next game that they're going to buy for their
Right.
for their device. And when I mentioned the fact the school could start donating food grown by their own students, he immediately thought, this is great because it will help our kids to refocus from just thinking about themselves to looking outward and focusing on, hey, we can actually use food that we grow at our school and help other people.
Exactly. From consumption to
so
donation.
It's changing. It's
Inwards, outwards.
It's helping to change students' focus from just themselves to looking outwards.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that, I was like, hey, that's a big deal.
Marvelous.
And so my goal with Grow for Good is to basically sign up as many schools and companies using rooftop gardens to grow as much food as possible on site in Tokyo and grow some for themselves.
There's so many spots, John. I mean, Hibiya
Rooftops,
Midtown, Otemachi One, they've all got spots that can be available.
Yeah. And then to basically get as many schools and companies to donate food to the food banks, and then flood the food banks with fresh Tokyo grown food, and that will help to alleviate hunger issues in Tokyo. But then just imagine if that strategy was transplanted into Kyoto, Osaka, Shanghai, Kuala Lumpur, London, Auckland, Sydney, San Francisco, you name it, worldwide. That simple strategy of grow some, give some, where people who have space for gardens grow food for themselves and donate the rest to people that need it more than we do. And that's not just talk. That's working. That's been working for the last years.
Brilliant. Wow, I'm getting chills listening to you talking about this. This is so lovely. And you didn't know that when you started with that one pot and a packet of seeds. I keep coming back to that because it just goes to show you don't have to start, full throttle. You've created this from one small experiment, and look at what's happening now, and look at the change you're creating,
generating, growing,
growing.
Yeah, you're growing.
You're literally growing this across Tokyo. Yeah, cool. What could happen next? So it's really fantastic, and we're so thrilled to know more about this. And you might have said I'm guilty of plastering this across the internet. But actually, I think you'll find it's not as well known as you thought, and you're not as noisy and annoying as you potentially thought. So don't give up. Keep telling people what you're doing, and I think that's really important to know that. Yeah.
Well, and the bottom line here is that, especially here in Tokyo, the grandparents' generation here, the oldest generation, they're from the generation, they're from largely the last generation that commonly grew food. It's been the youngest two generations who live in the big cities in Japan who have basically lost the motivation and not been taught how to grow food. The skills haven't been lost. They're largely embedded in the oldest generation that are largely still here.
Yeah.
They just haven't been passed down. And they haven't been passed down largely because, especially here in like Tokyo, every supermarket's drowning in food.
Why would you grow it?
It's so accessible. It's so accessible. And there's so much of it. There's no need to grow your own food. But if you're concerned about personal health, then the game changes, and it changes completely. And especially if you're concerned about the environment too.
Anything else then, John, coming up for you? Any crystal ball gazing on what you think is going to be the future in Japan? Things that might be trending that you're seeing on your little radar there within your work that you're doing or elsewhere that you think might be quite useful for other Kiwis listening in to think about?
In terms of like the work that I do, I think urban farming is going to take off. Yeah, and it is taking off. And the timing is perfect because people's awareness of climate change and sustainability is rapidly increasing. And urban farming, basically, like growing food without chemicals, it tackles 7 of these 17 SDGs just by growing food without chemicals. That's a big hit just by basically gardening.
Yeah, so
Urban farming
SDGs are all the rage here right now,
Yep.
right? It's all about the SDGs, yes.
growing food without chemicals can be clearly promoted to companies who want to do more in that space.
Oh,
And if they couple that with food donations, then they can basically get a sustainability strategy and a community support one in one package, in one activity,
Yeah, ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't it?
and feed their staff healthier food as well.
Yeah.
it's mind blowing. I mean, a lot of the places that I visit, factories or plants, they have big gardens, right? And they're a lot of Japanese style trees, etc. But imagine if some of those were just converted into a garden that the staff could play with when they're out at their lunch times or something. It becomes an activity that they do and generate back into the community. It's just mind blowing what is possible. It really is.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
can people get hold of you, John, if they're really interested in this? And I certainly hope they are. Is there some way they can get hold of you? Or if they want to do their own urban garden, is there some offer you might have for people who want to get into that? How do they do that?
People can basically find me on Facebook.
Oh, you're
and
all over
LinkedIn.
the internet,
On
aren't you?
LinkedIn,
Yes.
Jon Walsh, yeah. And if they get in touch, I can basically provide urban farming services that can help them do anything and grow anything anywhere the sun shines, from garden installation to vertical farming, hydroponics, teaching students, teaching families, teaching companies, teaching at schools.
Great.
Yeah, and basically the sky's the limit at the moment. So it's pretty exciting to be doing what I'm doing. And like I said, the timing coupled with the greater awareness of sustainability and environmental issues, this couples into all of that. It slots in perfectly. And also many people are becoming more concerned about what they eat, especially organic food, which is simply real food grown naturally. And that's all part of like what I do too. The bottom line is that if you want to grow food, sowing seeds is easier than brushing your teeth. So if you can brush your teeth without too much hassle, you can sow seeds and plant a garden.
Super proud of you. I just love that you're helping to teach Japanese and foreigners here something that they didn't know that they needed. It's just brilliant, John. And we just want to congratulate you on helping people know about this, on being a jandal in Japan, for sharing your story. I'm full of enrichment now. I want to go and do it myself. I've got a little few pots, but I feel like I'm excited to do more. So thank you so much for telling us all about your tips for success, for being a super person who's a Kiwi in the land of the rising sun. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your time. It's been fun.
I loved hearing John's story about growing all this change in Tokyo. What a great story.
I know, and sowing the seeds in his own little way that he did through spinach in a pot. I just love how that has now actually burst into what he's got now as a business that's thriving.
Amazing. Literally just growing.
Also to go from saying he's not a teacher, never taught before, and he is now teaching children and others, adults as well, how to do their urban farming. It's brilliant. Shows you, doesn't it, how you can go from not knowing what you're good at, not knowing what you're looking for, not knowing what you're dreaming about, and actually it's right inside you and you never knew. Go.
So impressive. Yeah. So his strategy has been to start with, like he knew someone, so he started there. And that's just led to where he is today with creating this network of schools that he works with. And he has mentioned it's international school network, which they needed that, right? Whereas potentially the Japanese schools are already doing a lot of this kind of farming in their curriculum anyway. So they don't really need John's help, but he noticed that this was missing from international schools. So even though he's in Japan, he's still working with a lot of international people. And there are a lot of foreigners here to work with as well. Like You come to Japan, you don't just have to work with Japanese people. There are foreigners
Yeah.
to work with here, right? It's
But you're
totally
right,
a business in itself.
you're right. He picked on somebody he'd already had a conversation with in the article that he wrote about them, and jumped on that as his first lead. What a brilliant way to do it. Very, very good. I thought he had some real insights there on, like, his 3Ps were great, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Nail those, you're halfway there almost, right?
Promptness, professionalism, and
Politeness.
politeness. Yes, exactly. That was really great. I thought also the way he chose his partner was just somebody
Hang
who
on there. Yeah.
made me really, really think about, how do I assume that people may not be a good partner for my business, or how would I think maybe they're another nationality, they couldn't possibly work with me as a New Zealander. He's moved all over that and got to somebody, found their heart and taken a chance in a way, but obviously working very, very well as for that as well. You never know who you might be partnering with just around the corner.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Well, we're so thrilled to have gotten to know you more, Jon, through this episode. And we are very excited to see what happens next. We know you've got lots of plans, and we will be keeping our eyes peeled to see how we can help, if we can, with our Jandals network. It's an ever-growing network of amazing people, isn't it, Catherine?
Exactly. Go grow some more and give some more, just as Jon said. See you on the next episode.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jane. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!